Okay. All right, guys. So today we are here looking at 11.3, which is writing equations of lines. Okay. So in these notes, no. All right. So like I was saying, today we're looking at writing equations of lines. Now, here's the deal. We are going to be writing equations. We are going to write them in one way. We are going to write them using the slope-intercept form. So what I want to remind you of is what the slope-intercept form is. And I'm going to do that here up top as just a reminder. Reminder that slope-intercept form is just simply y equals mx plus b. Okay, that's the biggest thing to remember. That's what we're going to do. The things that happen are you are given different scenarios each time that you have to write them, okay? So you might be given a graph. You might be given the slope and a point. You might be given the slope and the y-intercept. You might be given 2 points. All of these are different scenarios of what you're going to be given. And you've got to figure out what you need and what you've got to do. Here are the big things, and I'm going to highlight those a different color. The things that you need every single time are the slope and the b value, which is your y-intercept, okay? So just as a reminder, that is the slope and then the y-intercept. Those are the two things you need to be able to write the equation of a line. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go through each little square, okay, and do some of that. Give me 1 second. All right, sorry about that. All right, so the first way we're going to look at this is given a graph, okay? So you can see in these notes there are steps and there are ways that you're going to do it, and then there's an example. So to write an equation given the graph, the first thing you got to find is the slope from the graph. So that's just like we did yesterday, finding 2 points and counting. Second step is to find the y-intercept from the graph. And then the third one is just to insert those into the slope-intercept form of the equation. So we are looking here. We're going to go through and kind of knock this thing out. So first things first, we got to find 2 points to count the slope. I always like to choose the y-intercept as one of those points. So we're here and we're going to put the dot there. So there's my y-intercept dot. And then I've got to find another dot where it lines up. Okay, so the next one I see is this point right here. Okay, those are my 2 points. So that's what I'm going to do to help me find my slope, which is my m value, and then my b value, which is my y-intercept. Well, step number 1 is to count. Remember, I always start at the lowest point, so I'm going to count up to get even, so that's 1. But I went up, so that's the positive direction. And then I've got to count over. It's 1, 2. So it is 2, and that is in the negative direction. Okay? So, remember, your slope is rise over run, so it would be positive 1 over negative 2. So that is your slope. Your b value is your y-intercept, which is at positive 1. So to get your final answer, you just got to take those and plug them in. Y would equal to negative 1/2 x plus 1. Any questions on that here? Yes, ma'am. Well, so it's not going to be 2 over 1. If you even start from the y, that's fine. But remember, it's always rise over run. So it's whether you go up or down. Okay? So I could have started over here. And the first thing I would have done is gone down. So that just means like here, and I'll count it real quick in red. If I started here and went down, that would be a negative 1. But then I would go 2 in the positive direction. It would still give me negative 1/2 because it's always my rise over my run. It is on the y-axis. So remember, the y-axis goes up and down. So it's where it crosses on that. This is horizontal. That would be the x-intercept. Okay? All right. All right, so that is the first kind of equation that you're going to see. Okay? Now, the next kind is another one, and we saw an example of this last night. Here you are given the slope and the y-intercept. When they give that to you, it's as simple as making sure you get the slope right and the y-intercept right and plugging them in. So here you just insert the slope, which remember is your m value, and the y-intercept, which is your b value, into the equation. So as you look here, it says find the equation of a line with the slope of -3 and a y-intercept of 5. You just have to know that that is your m value, and then the intercept is +5. That is your b value. So it would just be plugging in. So you would get -3x plus 5. Questions on that? These are my favorite kind of problems just because they're a little bit easier. Yes, sir. How did I get the 1 for B? So on the last one, just going back real quick, how I got the 1 for my B value is this line crosses the y-axis at the number 1. That's where I got it. So if it had crossed up here at 3, then my B value would have been 3. No, the 2 is up here, so this is a number 1. How I got the -2 was I counted over, so that was for my slope. Better? We good? Okay. All right, so let's jump down here to the one below that, which is number 3. Okay? Here, you will be given the slope of the line and then a point. Okay? Here are the steps that you need to do to solve that. When this is the case, you are going to insert the slope into the equation y equals mx plus b, all right? And then you will have to solve for the y-intercept. How you will solve for the y-intercept is you will use the point that they gave you and plug that in for your x and your y value and solve for b. Once you solve for b, then you have your slope and your b value. You can write the final equation. So what that would look like is this one right here. It says find the equation of a line given the slope is 7/2 and it goes through the point 2, 5. So here's how this would work. You would start by saying, okay, I know my slope, which is my m value. So I've got y is equal to 7/2x plus b. I don't know what b is, but I do know that I was given this point. Well, the special thing about this point is it has an x value, which is 2, and a y value, which is 5. What that means is I could plug those into the equation for x and y, which would leave me with a single variable that I could solve for. So the next step is to plug in. Well, y is really the number 5, so I'd plug in a 5. And that is going to be equal to 7/2. But then for x, I'm going to plug in a 2 plus my b value. All we're doing is evaluating the equation. We did this during our first unit a little bit. We spent a day on that where I gave you different x values, and you had to plug them in. Now what we would do here is just work this out. Well, we can't do anything with the 5 over there. I would highly suggest you do this in your calculator, okay? Huh? It's not going to be -7 here. It's going to be +7, okay? So as you look at this, yeah, your 7 is 100% correct. If you do 7/2 times 2, you would get 7. It's not negative because you don't have to, when you move it over, you'll subtract it 7, so you're a step ahead of me. But perfect job right there. Do I need to show you that math up top to show you how I got that? Okay, I'm going to show it to you. So if I had 7/2 times 2, it's really 2/1. You multiply across the top. 7 times 2 is 14. On the bottom, 2 times 1 is 2. 14 divided by 2 is 7. So that's why this would turn into a 7 plus b. Then to move it over, oops, sorry about that. You would subtract 7 from both sides, and you would end up getting a b value of -2. So now you have your b value and you have your m value from up top. You can write your final equation. Y would equal 7/2x minus 2. Questions? Feeling okay? All right. I know this is a lot of different examples. We're just trying to make sure that we cover everything. All right. Now, the next one, which in my opinion is one of the harder ones, okay? It's because you are not given the slope or the y-intercept. Okay, what you are given in this one are two different equations, okay? Or excuse me, 2 different points, all right? Not 2 different equations, 2 different points. When this happens, there's a very specific order that you have to follow and things you have to remember. When you are given that, the first thing you've got to do is find the slope using the slope formula. Notice the slope formula was given to you up here. Y is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We did that last week when we first looked at slope. All right. Then once you find the slope, you essentially do what you did over here. You take the slope and a point, you plug it in and solve for your y-intercept. So it's basically doing the problem we just did with an additional step. So as I come down here and look, I see that they give me 2 points here, and I'm going to rewrite them. -5 and 3, and -3 and -1. All right? So step number 1 is to find the slope. Well, I've got to label these points. This is going to be x1 and y1. This is going to be x2 and y2. So I want to start by finding my slope. Well, my slope is going to be y2, which is -1, minus y1, which is 3, over x2, which is -3, minus x1, which is a -5. Reminder, I wrote it exactly how it is. That's why I have minus a negative. But we know that minus a negative would make a positive. So you'd end up getting here -4 up top. And on the bottom, you'd end up getting +2. If I simplify that, -4 divided by 2 is -2. Are we okay? So I've done all that work to get to this point. Now all I've gotten is y is equal to -2x plus b. I do not know what my b value is. Here is the part that is kind of easier, but it confuses students at times. Sorry, I had a little stutter there. You can choose either point you want. So there's more options because there's not a wrong one, but you can only choose one. You can't mix these two, you just got to choose. Sometimes it's just easier to always take your x1 and your y1 and plug them in down here to solve this. So if I did that, I would take this point and I would plug it in down here. That means I would plug in a 3 for y is equal to -2, but then plug in a -5 for x, and then that would be plus my b value. Then, just like before, we want to simplify. Okay, so you would get 3 equals -2 times -5 is positive 10 plus b. Then to move that 10, you have to subtract it, and you end up getting -7 is equal to b. So now you have your b value, and you have your slope that you solved for earlier. So all you have to do here is take those and plug them in. Y is equal to -2x minus 7. questions on any of those? All right. We've got two final examples that kind of go hand in hand, and they're going to be refreshers for you that you're going to get to look at and go through that way, okay? So the first one is comparing a line, or how do I want to say this? You're going to have to write the equation when you want it to be similar to a line. So what's going to happen here is you are given a parallel line and a point, and you want to make sure that your line is parallel to this and it goes through this. Here is the big takeaway, and you can see it up here. When you are trying to find the slope from the equation of a parallel line, you must remember that parallel lines have the exact same slope. So what's going to happen is you will be given a line. If it is a parallel line, you just want to identify the slope, which is your m value, and make sure that it is the same in the new equation. Okay, so what that means, I'm going to skip down here and make sure we're good to go. On this bottom part, they give you the point of -5, -1, and they want it parallel to the line 4/5x plus 1. Well, what's the slope in the line 4/5x? 4/5. So that means the slope of this line is 4/5. And since we want it parallel, we need our slope to be the slope stays the same. So what that means is, so far, I know that y is going to equal 4/5x plus b. Do I know what my b value has to be of the equation? No, but they did give me a point. So I want to use that point they gave me for my x and my y. So instead of being y, I would plug in -1. That is going to equal 4/5 times a -5 for x plus b. Did I lose anybody there? It's the same process when you're given a point. You got to just plug it in. Now, I know that this is going to become -1 is equal to. If I take 4/5 and multiply it by -5, I've got to make it -5/1. If I multiply those, 4 times -5 becomes -20. 5 times 1 is 5. You end up getting -4. So that means it turns into -1 equals -4 plus b. To get b by itself, you would add 4 to both sides. And you get 3 is equal to b. So now you have your b and you have your slope. So you've just got to write your final equation. Y is equal to 4/5x plus 3. Questions? That was a little quicker. Are you okay? The biggest thing there is knowing that parallel slopes are the same. And the reason I'm making that a big deal is because you could have a perpendicular slope, okay? If it is a perpendicular slope, you need to know that perpendicular lines have lines that are negative reciprocal slopes, okay? I'm going to give you an example out here to the side, okay? An example of a negative reciprocal. If I gave you a slope of 4/7, the negative reciprocal is found by doing this, okay? I would call it my perpendicular slope, so I'm going to use That's shorthand for perpendicular. It's an upside down T. So perpendicular slope. Here's what you do for a negative reciprocal. The first thing you do is change the sign. So if the sign was positive, down here it is negative. So I know it's going to be negative. And then the only other thing you do is for the reciprocal is you take the top and bottom and you flip them. So the perpendicular slope here would be negative 7 over 4. That's all you've got to do. That's it. All right. Now, the only other thing to remember is if this had started as negative, down here it would be positive. But that's it. So all you do is you change the sign, flip the top and the bottom. That's how you get your perpendicular slope. Then you would do just like we've done every other time you're given a point. You would plug in your x and y and you would solve for your y-intercept. So looking at this example, we would see, okay, well, we know that the slope of this line was 1 over 7, but they ask our slope to be a perpendicular. So what I would say, all right, well, this slope is 1 over 7, but I need it to become the perpendicular slope. Well, that perpendicular slope means I have to change the sign, so it would be negative, and then flip the numbers. Well, instead of being 1 over 7, it would be 7 over 1. Can I reduce that? Yeah. What's anything divided by 1? Itself. So the slope is really just negative 7. Okay? That means that now we've got to look at this and go figure out the next part. So right now we know y is equal to negative 7x plus b. But our b value, we don't know. So we've got to use the x and the y from what we were given. So that means our y is now negative 4, which is equal to negative 7. X is now negative 2 plus b. There are no fractions, so it's just going through and simplifying. Negative 4 equals positive 14 plus b. I got that because two negatives make a positive. Then to move it over, I have to subtract 14. I end up getting negative 18 is equal to b. So now I have my b value and I have my m value from earlier. So y will equal negative 7x minus 18. Questions? All right, so what we are going to do now is just get some extra practice with this. Again, this is the practice. You're going to have to look at it. I will take questions at the start of class tomorrow before we look at our quiz review. Ready, set, go.